Welcome to Hitting Home. I'm your host, Megan Driscoll.
And I'm Becky Coletta.
And we are here to break down how decisions in D.C. affect our local communities.
Because all politics are local politics.
Welcome to Hitting Home with your hosts, myself, Megan Driscoll, and
Becky Coletta.
Thanks for tuning in. We actually have a kind of exciting, different today. It's different today, yeah. We're going to be talking about taking action. So how do we take action? And I think this is something that you and I have done a lot of in terms of caring about things, complaining about them, and then actually doing something about it. Because it's actually not fun to just know that there are problems, complain about the problems, and then not take any step to remediate. It's actually not good for your health as well. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But so that's what we're going to talk about today. How can you take action on some of the things that we've talked about, like some of these issues that are concerning to us and should be concerning to you? What can you do about it? So we got some ideas we're going to share. We're going to talk about them.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of every episode, we try to say something about how you can get involved or take action or learn something. This time, it's all focused on how you take action because
what does that? Yeah, what does it look like? Yeah.
And people think it's hard. Sometimes, like you said, it's harder not to take action because you're sitting there stewing. And the one thing that I think I found, and I think you have too, that you develop a group of people who make you feel supported, that you're not in a world where no one thinks like you or where you don't understand.
Yeah, you just create a new stream of friendships too. I think that's the other thing. You're creating yet another new community. One of the things I think, and sort of just to lay the groundwork, I do think that politics has already substantially changed our friendships, our relationships with our families. I think that there's been no place where that has been able to be maintained status quo. And so if you are feeling strongly about the direction the country is going in and you're concerned, this is an avenue to create a new community. And what you might find is some of the older people that you are friends with, or your sort of older friends groups and family that maybe you didn't talk about it as much, when they learn what you're doing, will join you. And so it's not only creating a new community, but it's actually creating a new relationship with friends that you've always had because you're getting to see them in a new way.
Some deeper connections have happened for me, even on Facebook with people I've known over the years.
Yep.
But we just never talked about politics. We were business or family, friends. And it's gotten harder for some people in some relationships, but you work through that. But you're less isolated overall, I think, when you take action. And right now, I think there's strength in numbers.
Yeah.
And it's really important to take action.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so first and foremost, we are big advocates for voting. And one of the things I think people don't understand or don't know is that your voter record is public. So I can't see what exactly you're voting on. I can't see if you voted in a Democratic or a Republican in the actual vote, but I know if you actually voted.
I know if you pulled a Democratic or a Republican primary
ticket.
But people do that for a lot of different reasons.
Exactly. But I know every time there's an election in the town, there's a voter record that gets sent out. So just know that your vote is actually out there for people to see that you are a voter or a non-voter. I think that was surprising to people when they learned.
It's a little creepy for a lot
of people, but I think it's a reality, and I want people to know that it can happen.
Right.
So voting is important, not just because you'll be publicly shamed by your peers, but
no, I don't think that's the most important reason.
No. But know that you will be found out if you don't vote. But voting is your voice. I don't think that we can under stress that this is your voice and how many people don't vote.
Particularly locally.
Well, even so I think there were 12 or 13,000 eligible voters in Duxbury for the presidential election, and only 10,000 showed up. So 3,000 people sat out, which I find amazing, and that's a very big election. But the amount of people so you're talking about, if you have 100%, let's say you have 10,000 people that show up for a national vote where the presidential election, it goes down by 90% in all other town elections from there. So that means 90% of the people opt out of the voting system for anything other than a presidential election. That's insane.
So for your override vote in Duxbury this year, you had 4,000 show up
We
for
did
a
much
town
better.
election. That is amazing.
Even though it wasn't really amazing, we needed more people. But
You needed more people, but compared to normal, in Pembroke, where we have more registered voters, I think around 15, we on a typical town election, we might have somewhere between 1,500 to maybe 2,500 if a lot of people show up.
Yep.
And part of that is information, right?
Yep.
Because people don't say they don't know enough about local elections. So part of voting leads to I think the next action item.
Know
which
what's
is
happening.
Know what's happening.
Yeah, know what's happening in your town. And you know, there's no easier time to be involved in your local government than right now, because what COVID did do is allowed the access to be able to watch what's happening on YouTube and online. So every single town is, for the most part, is recording these meetings on school committee, select board, just some of the bigger boards. You can actually, by the next morning, they're already uploaded online. So, you know, make a point to actually join a select board meeting every few months and just hear what's going on, and either show up in person, which I think can be very powerful, particularly if you want to ask a question. They usually always have an open forum part at the end where you can kind of get up at the podium and ask a question. But if you can't do that, download it the next day, listen to it like you listen to us in the morning or on the treadmill or whatever. I think it's worthwhile understanding and just getting a better understanding of what's ahead. Oftentimes there will be a vote on something really important and you don't even know anything about it, but it's been talked about for 6 to 9 months prior to that, had you been paying attention, right? And it's really tough, I think, to like break through to get information out to people, but it's really easy for people to get information. They just have to want to. So I think we're encouraging people to not only vote, but to do a better job understanding what's going on in your town and looking underneath the hood. How do you make a sausage?
So I was on the select board in Pembroke during COVID, and we started to get a lot more people, I think, watching the meetings because they were home and they had time.
Nothing better to do.
Nothing better to do than watch a select board meeting. But what would really pop were the school board meetings.
Yeah.
People wanted to know what was happening with distancing, with remote, with hybrid, with masking.
Yep.
And so people really felt compelled, and you'd have 300 and 400 people signing up to be in real time on a school board meeting.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see that all the time.
Yeah,
you know,
be great.
that when people are talking about budgets, that's important. Not just at the end of the day when you're coming to town meeting to vote up or down, but it's important as the conversations are happening. You can't have that level of depth in 2 hours.
No, the other thing
If
too is,
somebody's doing 6 meetings of an hour or two apiece,
Yeah.
there's a lot more depth about why this salary merits this pay, or why this line item needed to go up this year because we needed to buy a new computer program for that office. Or, you know, there's a lot of conversations when you've sat on a select board or an advisory committee or a school committee, or you've just listened to these things. There's a lot more detail that goes into those meetings.
well, the other thing too is there's a lot of like, I don't show up for any of these meetings, I don't pay attention, yet I'm going to have an opinion at the end about how things should have been done. Which
it's a little unfair.
It's a little unfair
to the volunteers,
who spend hours and hours and hours of their time, you know, devoted to whatever the task is. Even unelected, there's a lot of committees in every town that operate that are unelected. They're volunteers, and they give up an enormous amount of their time to look at these things. They usually are qualified in some way. They're interested in it because they have a background in it or whatever. So anyway, my point is that, you know, don't also just show up at the end and lob a bunch of complaints about something if you haven't actually looked under the hood and been involved in making the sausage, because I do think that that's also just, it's upsetting for the people that do spend a lot of time on it. The other reason why to get involved and to look under the hood and to participate in some of these meetings throughout the year.
Or join a committee.
We'll talk about that. But is this issue of misinformation. So there are people who are trying to manipulate how you think about topics in town, and they are opinions, and they often are not based in fact. And so in order to combat that, you combat that with truth and with seeing with your own eyes, right, and not the gaslighting. So another way to combat that is to participate, to listen, to hear with your own ears what someone's saying, as opposed to just taking someone else's word for it, which is basically just an opinion based on some facts, part facts. Sometimes I'll read things that someone will say 14 things and they've chosen one. And it's out of context. I think that's reality TV does that, right? Like we're conditioned to just take something and then make a story out of it without seeing the context to which it was said.
Or somebody will take a theme, like anti-immigrant theme, and they'll apply it to something that is really far removed from that issue.
School committee.
Well, I'm thinking of MBTA.
They'll apply to MBTA. They'll anything. It could be applied to anything. Housing.
On the MBTA
zoning,
and
planning.
housing, they kept talking about this is all about building housing for immigrants.
Right.
MBTA, first off, that law was passed before we had an immigrant crisis. It had nothing to do with immigrant housing. If anything, it was building, the hit on MBTA zoning was not that it was going to build cheap housing for immigrants, it was that you only had to build, like 40B requires you to have 20% affordable.
Right.
MBTA only required 10% affordable. So what was happening is that people were saying, oh, this is all about someone wanting to build housing for immigrants. And it's like, no, the thing that may not feel good is that they're going to build $800,000 condos for wealthy people, and you're not going to get the housing to be as affordable as you want it to be.
Yeah, it's the opposite, actually. And
it's the opposite.
If you go back to that, just using this as an example, if you go back to that law and you actually read the study that Governor Baker initiated to figure out how, really the issue was, how do we create more housing
so that you don't have scarcity that's driving up prices.
Exactly. And so they did a big study, and out of that study, the law was born, essentially. So if you go back to that study, it talks about the origins of this. It was really creating more housing so that we can keep our economy growing, as housing was the block to our growth, essentially. I mean, we have so many other blocks to our growth now.
We'll have a housing episode. I'm just using this as an example where someone takes a political theme, like immigrants, and tries to get people riled up thinking that this law is about immigrant housing, and this law is so far removed from immigrant housing it's not even funny, but you're going to see on social media and elsewhere immigrant housing and bringing more immigrants to town.
Because that's going to get the people all worked up.
And fear.
And fear.
It's all about driving fear, right, as opposed to facts. Whereas if you get involved and if you look at these issues,
hear with your own ears,
hear with your
see
own
with
ears,
your own eyes. Yes, that's what we're encouraging. We're encouraging actually getting involved. So now the next step would be join a committee. Speaking of MBTA communities, I was really disenfranchised with the first go around at the MBTA communities vote in Duxbury, so much so that I actually went to a meeting and was like, hey, how did this happen? I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know that they had been working on it for 9 months. I missed all of the ways in which they tried to reach out to the community. I don't think that they did a big push to do that. It was kind of,
I went to a lot of forums.
It was opaque. It was hard to find information about it. But so I did join the committee now, and I am getting I am so glad that I did. It's actually a very frustrating experience on this particular case because it's so heated, the topic in general. But I will tell you that it is kind of amazing to be involved in your local government in that way. I've served on other boards as well. This one I think is just kind of a hot button issue. But
well, it's funny because I started to join a committee and get involved in a completely different way. It was moving to town and someone said, well, you have a background in this area. You're an attorney, you worked in communications. Could you help us build a cable studio and get involved on this cable TV committee? So it was about taking a skill set and using it for the benefit of the town. It wasn't an agenda, it wasn't It wasn't because I was politically motivated. It was more just, oh, I can help in this way. But then the more you know, and the more you see people spreading disinformation, I think the more you want to get involved.
Yes.
And so my involvement kind of grew over time, as opposed to jumping in to join a committee on a issue that was as difficult as MBTA.
Yeah.
So there are different ways. All I'm pointing out is there's different ways to join a committee. It can be join a beautification committee. It can be join a library committee. It doesn't have to be something contentious. It can be something where you just start to see how things work. And how you can contribute your skills.
When I first moved to Duxbury, I joined the business development. Duxbury had just lost its only grocery store, and so we were like in a food desert basically, and so we needed a grocery store, but we were trying to woo them back and kind of refigure out, like, how do we build more commercial investment in Duxbury? And I would go with my daughter, who was just born, and she was in a bucket seat. And I would bring her to the meetings in a bucket seat. It was hilarious.
Perfect.
And it was, anything goes. And it was a really great, again, it just grabs you. And so again, based on my business background, that was what I was interested in. So I think, check out, if you go to your town website, all of the committees have a page there. The chair's name is usually listed as well, and there's contact information. So you can reach out to them and express your interest. Usually there's like the process is you fill out it's a talent bank application through the town. You express which committees you're interested in. A lot of them have at-large members. Some committees are elected only. Some committees are a volunteer only. So, just take that next step, because you have skills that the town really needs. And more involvement in town government is
It's how we build our communities.
It's how we build our communities.
And how we get also past some of the divisiveness, because you get to know other people who might be politically different from you, but when it comes to the community, they want to build a place where we all can live and work and raise our families and be happy.
Yeah.
And so the more
we take advantage, we take for granted, this thing that happens for us.
Well, and
it
I
gets
think
our roads cleaned and makes our spaces beautiful and organizes events and does our zoning and decides how we can, what kind of addition we can make onto our house. I mean, we just take for granted.
But it also humanizes people in your town.
Yeah.
And it says, okay, these are people I don't have to agree with people on everything, right? I just need to be able to figure out how we all come together and build a cable TV studio, or how we build a community center. And it really, or how we apply the rules on a planning board. The other thing I will say is, maybe before you put out an application, you attend 2 or 3 meetings of whatever committee sounds interesting to you. That'll make the people in the committee feel like you want to be there.
Yep, and get to know them. And you get to decide if you want to do it or not.
And they're more likely to ask you to come in and join the committee if you've done that. And then you don't feel so funny filling out an application, because you've already humanized the process a lot.
Exactly.
So find a committee you like and try to just see how it works.
Yep.
And that's a suggestion for everybody.
Yep. And run for something. I know in our recent election, we didn't have a single seat that was opposed. So every single candidate run unopposed in Duxbury for planning board, you name it. There was actually one seat where nobody ran, and we actually ended up with a write-in candidate, which is fine. But we need more people running for town and local government.
And it ebbs and flows. The first time I ran for office in Hanson, there were actually 5 people running for the select board seat that I ended up winning.
I think we're losing people, though. I think that was then, and this is now. I think we're.
But so this year in Pembroke, we have almost every race is contested.
Oh, good, great.
But that was also because people started to get to know each other, form communities, and encourage people to run.
Yeah.
So encourage people to run if you won't do it.
Yeah, encourage people to run for sure. Okay, so we talked about how to get involved in your local government. Millions, I feel like there's just not millions, but tons of ways in which you can do that. The other thing we want to just mention is this idea of talking about politics with your friends. And sharing with your friends your opinions, and engaging with them to join you at an event, and sort of spreading that your level of interest. You don't have to take this part of your personality. Like, if you're concerned about what's happening, and so many people are at our national and even in our local politics, you don't have to say this is off limits. You can talk about it. Now, you'll very quickly figure out who's interested and who's not, who wants to engage here and who doesn't. But I have multiple text chains happening with multiple groups of people in town and out of town, actually South Shore and local, of people who are interested in talking about what's happening. And it's actually a really nice way to share information and learn information from others sharing with me about stuff that they know obviously I care about. So
I also sometimes find that some people really just don't want to talk about it, and that's fine. But there's other people who really, it turns out, aren't following and don't know certain things. You'll say something,
surprised, right?
Yeah, you'll say something like, well, I can't believe they've just cut, $100 million plus in our education funding in Massachusetts. And that's actually happened. And people are like, oh, I missed that.
Well, we're saturated with such
Right.
amount of information, so much, and the speed to which this dismantling of the federal government is happening is taking us all by surprise. And there are a lot of people who I think are like, oh, I can't handle that. I can't listen to it. They want to know, but they can't handle it in the amounts. So hearing it from a friend and being a lifeline for someone to say, like, I'm a safe space. I'm a safe space for you to share how you feel about it. I think it's just a really important community, again, than just that community building that happens.
And I'm going to make my pitch that is not always popular for speaking up on social media.
Oh, you want to talk about that now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, can we get that? Can we get to that at last? Because I want to talk about joining a DTC.
So a Democratic Town Committee.
Yes. So Democratic Town Council, Democratic Town Committee. I think it depends on. I think they call different things in different places, right? Okay. In Massachusetts, though, there are Democratic Town Committees. Every town has one. In the show notes, I'll send a link where you can actually look up your town, and it'll give you the email address of the person who's the chair. I happen to be the chair of the Duxbury Democratic Town Committee, and we have seen our numbers balloon in the last 4 months as we've become more active. I will say that two things about this. I don't know the percentage shift of this, but there is an older group of chairs, and there might be a younger group of chairs, or some in the middle. It's a very mix. Some committees are way more active than others. We do have pretty active committees on the South Shore, but it really depends, and in the city for sure. So you do really need to, don't be discouraged if you go to your first meeting and it's not what you expected it to be. The idea is that if that happens, bring friends and sort of engage and bring new, fresh life. Some of these committees do need a sort of a younger perspective and some younger energy brought to them. I'm just being honest.
But so I've been on
and
Democratic.
They want that too.
Yeah. So I've been on Democratic Town Committee since 2003. And you're right. Like I've seen committees that go up and down and up and down, and sometimes it's all or nothing, right? People feel like it has to be all one way or all another way. But if people just show up,
bring the energy
and bring the energy and the ideas. A lot of times, well, maybe someone won't like that idea, but you can do that idea, and you can organize a subgroup to do that idea.
Yeah.
And so we need to be willing to bring our ideas and bring our energy and bring our effort. But I will say in the last couple of years, I've seen a lot of new energy in a lot of the Democratic Town Committees on the South Shore.
But elsewhere too, I think it's a function of what's happening at the national level. But don't forget about that town committee, because that is your local resource for. These are going to support candidates that are running on topics that you care about. They're going to be creating standouts. They're creating environments. They have meetings.
They have access to information.
They have access to information. They're providing a receptacle by which you can be involved and understand what's happening through the lens of people who think and feel the way you do. And I think that it's yet another way to have a community. I mean, our Democratic Town Committee last week was from 88 to high school. And it was just so beautiful to have such a broad demographic of people who are interested in getting involved with the wisdom and the knowledge on both ends that they bring. So I think it's really, I really want to put a plug in for that it is what you make of it, and you bring your own energy and ideas to it. And I really encourage people to join.
But there are a lot of people who aren't Democrats and may not be comfortable joining a Democratic Town Committee.
We're a big tent. And we, in Duxbury particularly, we had several people there who were registered, unregistered, or registered independents. So if you believe
But technically, they can't be a member of the committee.
Yeah, but they can participate and come every single week.
You can participate.
They can't vote, but...
So there's also other groups, is what I want to say. Indivisible, Progressive Mass. Online resources around education. If you look at our show notes, you'll start to see some organizations based on the topic.
Yep.
There are organizations that are topic specific. There are organizations that are location specific. There's a South Shore Democratic Caucus. People are working on re-energizing
guns violence.
Moms Demand Action.
Moms Demand Action.
So you can join a local Moms Demand Action chapter. 5051, so 50501 is a new organization that is organizing some protests and things around here. And that's something that you can register nationwide, but also around here.
In collaboration with a nationwide
so you can organize to go to local events there. You can look at Mobilize is another place to find local events.
Yep.
You can go to the Women's March is one of the organizing groups. And in Progressive Mass, Indivisible, DTC, I'm looking at my notes. Those are just some of the bigger ones. But
and
if
the
you
big
look
ones,
at topics.
and your local town committee will know about those too, and they will be usually sending a group of people to represent. So you might even be able to get on a ride share to go together. I know that a lot of the town committees actually traveled together to some of these events recently. So just know that that's the receptacle by which you can learn all of these things and really get involved. Okay, so we're going to finish up with how we feel about social media.
So
and what to do on social media.
So I sort of start with a communications psychology type look at social media and how, as mass communications, it shapes our thinking about the world. It shapes our social reality. Mm-hmm. And what I've seen, I got on social media early because I had a small child, and sometimes if he was napping, all I could do was sit next to him to keep him asleep and look at social media. So I've seen it evolve since 2007 and evolve in a lot of good and bad ways. And my pitch is that it has become so taken over by hostility and right-wing disinformation.
Well, and keyboard warriors hiding behind a fake profile, and
that we really, those of us who want to spread what we believe to be accurate information with resources, those of us who want to speak out differently, need to not be afraid to do it.
Yeah.
Either on our own profiles or in response to community comments on community pages. And it's not because you're trying to win an argument. You're not trying to win an argument on social media.
No.
And I get emotional sometimes, and I'll keep responding. It's bad. Really what you need to do is put the information out there, have a bunch of people putting the information out there so that people don't see just one side. That
and what
people
happens,
see multiple sides, and you'll see people say, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And you'll start to see people piling on a little bit one way or another. And we need to show a full dialogue because there's a lot of people just watching on social media. Almost like they used to watch TV.
Yeah, and if all they see is the negative getting all of the attention, it starts to shape their reality, and they then believe that must be true because so many people agree with it. I mean, there's a lot of psychology to that.
It's like TV used to do with the whole meme world syndrome.
Exactly.
And there's now indications that we're developing this meme world syndrome on social media. And we really need to think about what's being shown. I know it's hard. We don't all want to be in fights all the time. But the more people who speak out, the more we start to set a social reality that's truly a shared social reality that truly is what...
And representative of so many of what's really happening. Yeah. So the idea is like posts of when people are, really when someone is putting themselves out of there, support them. Support people who are putting themselves out there with information that is correct, with information that is true, and with the information that's aligned with how you believe things should be. Like those posts, share those posts. If you feel comfortable, create your own post, right? You don't need to get in a keyboard warrior with people, but the more people see how you feel and know that they're not alone, I can't tell you how many people reach out to me on a regular basis and say, I'm so glad you're out there talking about these things, and I'm cheering you on from behind the scenes. And so it does take something to be a little bold and brave to use your social media in that way. But I can tell you that I know it makes a really big difference in the overall dialogue of what's happening. I try to be kind with people. I try not to get into arguments with people. But if someone says something that's disinformation, I'll just say that's actually not factually correct. Here's the information. And so I think it's really important that we keep holding the record straight. And
you may not win the debate online.
Right.
But people who are watching on the sidelines
are like, oh, I agree with that.
Or they're going to be able to go back and look and make a decision for themselves because they're going to get two different sets of information. Yep. They can read it and learn and decide for themselves.
We all have to fight back against disinformation. It is taking, now when you have Facebook, not even fact checking anymore. So we are living in a world where we have to take back the truth in things, and we have to make sure that we feel confident in sharing them. So Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I hope this was really helpful. I hope this encourages everybody who's listening to us to get involved in whatever way that you can. We've given you a bunch of sort of a playbook by which we've followed. Yeah, and let us know, please. We'd like to hear, did you join a board? Did you go to a meeting? Did you do something? Did you put yourself out there on social media? Did you take any of this advice? We'd love to know more about it. But thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.